You could cut the tension with a knife in last night's debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Things got extra heated when reproductive rights came up. Let's take a look.
The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that.
What she says is an absolute lie. And as far as the abortion ban, no, I'm not in favor of abortion ban, but it doesn't matter because this issue has now been taken over by the states.
We learned some news about Harris as well.
I've made very clear my position on fracking. And then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away. So stop with the continuous lying about this stuff.
Talk of pets made it to the debate stage. Trump brought up that debunked story that's gone viral online that Haitian migrants are stealing and eating ducks from parks and people's cats. Let's watch.
What they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
Here to give his takeaway from last night's first and maybe only debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump is Republican strategist Melik Abdul. Welcome, Melik.
Thanks for having me.
So we played a few highlights there. Maybe they don't match up with what yours is, but what was your main takeaway from last night?
Well, let's just get into the raw analysis. Debates aren't about who delivers the best policy. Debates are about presentation. Debates are about the optics. And when it comes to the optics, it is pretty clear that Kamala Harris had a much better night than Donald Trump. In the similar way that Donald Trump had a much better night for Kamala Harris and then Joe Biden back in June. I think the big problem is, and I was saying this going into the debate, that Republicans run the risk of doing the same things that Democrats did in the June debate with Joe Biden. They were certain that Joe Biden would wipe the floor with Donald Trump. So they lowered expectations for Donald Trump so much that the only thing that Donald Trump had to do was at least just look presidential, seem as if he were presidential, and he ended up having a good night. In this case, Republicans had lowered the expectations for Kamala Harris. She's a horrible debater. We remember when Tulsi Gabbard went after her, Pete Buttigieg, a number of others have gone after, and she hasn't been the best in a debate, but she came locked, loaded, and ready. Probably shouldn't have used that term, but she came ready to debate Donald Trump, and she was able to deploy what are literally debate or pre-debate strategies. And I think that that worked for her in ways that it did not work for Donald Trump, because whether or not you believe she would do what she said that she was going to do, whether or not she was even being truthful in what it was she was saying, it was convincing enough in the form of a debate performance. And so that's why I think that Donald Trump had a lot of lost opportunities. He kind of touched on some things, but Donald Trump failed. You know, we just saw the Olympics, and we remember Simone Biles being able to land stick her landing. Donald Trump was not able to stick most of his landings. And that's how Kamala Harris, for me, she just hasn't the edge, and who ended up getting something out of the debate.
Well, many conservatives online are saying that's because Donald Trump wasn't just up against Kamala Harris, but he was also up against the moderators who fact-checked him a couple times to say things that he was saying were not true. They made no similar attempt to fact-check Kamala Harris. What do you think of the moderation and how that played into Trump's performance?
So I actually think that the attacks on the moderators are warranted here. We didn't see a similar thing in the CNN debate with Dana Bash and Jake Tapper. And it was noted in the media today, talking about CNN, that their fact checker found that Donald Trump lied. And this is by the time he had done his analysis. Donald Trump had lied 33 times and Kamala Harris had lied 0 times. Now, How is it that Kamala Harris, the things that she said about Charlottesville and some of these other things, Trump's position on abortion, wanting to ban, it doesn't matter. But once you get to debating that the moderators, claiming that the moderators weren't fair to me, it usually means you're on the losing side. Remember back in June, Democrats were saying that the moderators failed to fact check Donald Trump. So then they were blaming that on the moderators at this point. I think that conservatives have a valid argument about how the debate was moderated, because Kamala Harris, if I remember, was not challenged on any of the mistruthful or the lies that she told a number of times. While in the case of Donald Trump was even, when we're thinking about the Ukraine answer, they were essentially giving layups to Kamala Harris, asking Donald Trump instead of the question, or to Kamala Harris, how is it that we've been in this for about 2 years now, and we're sending billions of dollars over there to Ukraine. How is it that your administration hasn't moved us towards a ceasefire deal? What do you think? You guys just released this report to Congress on the next steps for Ukraine. Well, what actually does that mean? What is the strategy in Ukraine? They didn't ask her that. They asked Donald Trump, essentially, so you don't want Ukraine to win? Fine. Attack the moderators, but it does not excuse Donald Trump's own performance, where he failed to connect the dots on a number of issues. And I just think ultimately, since we're talking about optics, that is a thing that just did not work well in his favor. I do not believe that this debate will hurt Donald Trump in the same way that the June debate hurt Joe Biden, but it does feed into some of the negative narratives about Donald Trump. So it didn't necessarily hurt him like Biden, but it didn't help him a whole lot. Kamala Harris, in this instance, was helped a whole lot from her debate performance, because she at least looked presidential, whether you believe what she said or not.
I'm curious what you make of Donald Trump's statements on JD Vance. When he was asked about JD Vance saying he would sign a federal ban on abortions, Donald Trump said he's never talked to JD Vance about that. What do you make of their relationship and his recounting of JD Vance's policy, or rather lack thereof, on the debate stage last night?
So I was going in, I didn't think that this was a good pairing. Even though there were people who were saying that JD Vance has a relationship with Donald Trump, it's very hard to have a relationship with somebody that you've barely known for 2 years now. Donald Trump didn't have a relationship with JD Vance before JD Vance started running for the Senate. At least as far as I recall, there was no relationship there. And I think that relationship, it is not the type of relationship that Donald Trump has with maybe a Marco Rubio or even a Tim Scott, for that matter, because they've been able to kind of be the Donald Trump whisperer in ways that JD Vance, as the number two, simply hasn't been able to do. JD Vance recently answered the question on what would he and Trump do around addressing the issue of affordable, like childcare costs. JD Vance started talking about maybe having the grandmother babysit or credentialing requirements, and really not addressing the answer. I do not believe, and I think Donald Trump saying that he hasn't had a conversation with JD Vance about this, it speaks to my belief that there is not a strong relationship. What I believe that there are elements around Donald Trump who thought that JD Vance was a good pick. I'm not even convinced that JD Vance was Donald Trump's own first pick. I think that this was something that someone, maybe the last person in the room, what I've heard, that person is his son, Don Jr., convinced him that JD Vance was the man to carry the MAGA mantle. But I think that JD Vance has been a terrible pick, and his inability to move the numbers in any type of significant way, I think it speaks to that.
Melik Abdul, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.